The spotlight was supposed to crown him like a king. The music was supposed to ignite the stadium into madness. But on that unforgettable night, as Freddie Mercury rose above the crowd, like a living legend, something went terribly wrong. In a split second, the cable screamed, the mechanism stalled, and Freddie found himself dangling helplessly above the stage, suspended between glory and disaster. Tens of thousands of fans watched in awe, believed it was part of the show, but Freddie knew the terrifying truth. He was trapped. He was vulnerable. And one wrong movement could change everything. Yet what no one could possibly imagine is who would step forward to save him. A hero hidden in the shadows. A person Freddie never expected and whose actions that night remain buried in the memories of those backstage. Until now. Before this story ends, you will discover the fear Freddie carried in his chest, the shocking identity of the person who pulled him back from danger, and the emotional truth behind a moment the world never knew happened. This is one of the most dramatic, intimate, and untold stories of Freddie Mercury's life. It will leave you breathless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our emotional stories about Freddie Mercury. The year was 1982, and Queen was in the middle of one of the most ambitious tours of their career. West Germany pulsed with anticipation as nearly 60,000 fans crowded into the open-air stadium, their excitement echoing like thunder through the metal beams above the stage. Freddie Mercury stood in the dim backstage corridor, listening to the tremors of the crowd as if they were vibrations traveling straight into his bones. Normally, this was the moment he lived for, the breath before the explosion, the silence before the world bowed to his voice. But tonight, something felt wrong. He adjusted the strap of the gleaming silver harness that wrapped around his torso, its edges cold against the skin. It was part of a new stunt dreamed up by the production team. A dramatic entrance in the air, lowering him onto the stage like an operatic deity, descending from the heavens. It was bold, theatrical, dangerous, and exactly the kind of spectacle Freddie usually adored. And yet, as the stagehand tightened the final buckle, Freddie's fingers trembled ever so slightly. He hated that. "Darling," he murmured, forcing a smirk, "tell me this contraption isn't going to make a pancake out of me." The technician, young, nervous, sweat gathering at his temples, offered a quick, shaky smile. "It's safe, Mr. Mercury. Tested earlier. Twice." Freddie raised an eyebrow. His voice softened into a teasing but uneasy tone. "Twice? My cat gets more attention than that, sweetheart." The crew laughed politely, but Freddie didn't. He wasn't afraid of heights. He'd faced bigger demons. But something in the air tonight felt off. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe the loneliness that crept into him between shows. Or maybe the private battles he never allowed others to see were beginning to press harder against the armor he wore. He rested a hand against the wall, feeling the vibrations of the chanting crowd outside. They wanted Freddie the icon. Freddie the immortal. Freddie the man who never cracked. But right now, he didn't feel immortal at all. A production manager rushed in, headset askew. "Places. Lift in 30 seconds. Freddie inhaled sharply. Time to become the god they wanted. He stepped onto the small metal platform that served as the base of the aerial lift. The stagehands secured the final connections. With a mechanical hum, the platform began to rise slowly into the rafters, lifting Freddie toward the darkness above the stage. Below him, the stadium was a living ocean, waves of flashing lights, roaring chants, ripples of expectation. Freddie watched the scene with a strange mixture of thrill and dread. Then everything went black. Not the stadium, just a hanging space above the stage, where the lift paused, waiting for the cue. Freddie hung suspended in the void, guided only by the faint glow from the LED panels below. The silence up there was unnerving, broken only by the metallic ticking of gears. "Let's get on with it," he whispered, gripping the railing. But the universe had other plans. As the opening chords of "We Will Rock You" blasted through the stadium, the lift shuddered, a violent, unnatural jerk that snapped Freddie's head backward. He gasped. The platform tilted sharply to one side. Something metallic cracked above him, echoing like a gunshot in the cavernous rafters. Freddie froze. The crowd roared louder, convinced it was all part of the spectacle. But Freddie could feel the shift in the harness. The sudden give. The unnatural slack. He looked up into the darkness, seeing nothing but hearing everything. The groaning of a cable under strain. The faltering whine of failing machinery. No, 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 not now, he whispered. Another lurch. Harder this time. The lift stopped. Dead. Freddie was left dangling, suspended by a single cable that now groaned like an animal in pain. His pulse pounded against his throat. His fingers tightened around the railing so firmly that his knuckles turned white. He wasn't afraid of falling. He was afraid of falling here, like this, in front of everyone, powerless, human, fragile. Backstage, shadows erupted into chaos. Technicians shouted over one another. One sprinted toward the control panel. Another yelled for the backup system. Someone cursed that the emergency lowering mechanism wasn't responding. No one had rehearsed for this. No one knew what to do. From where he hung, Freddie could feel the panic rippling beneath the stage. But the crowd, oblivious, cheered louder, thinking the trembling platform was Freddie's dramatic flourish. Everything in him screamed to call for help, but he didn't. Freddie Mercury did not beg, did not show fear, did not let anyone see the cracks. So he stayed silent, gripping the rail as his harness dug painfully into his ribs. Then came a sound that chilled him to the marrow, a sharp, splintering snap from above. The cable jerked, dropping him an inch, just enough for Freddie to feel gravity grab his entire body with unforgiving force. For the first time in years, Freddie's breath hitched in terror, and in that suspended second, as the cable strained under the impossible weight, a figure suddenly moved through the shadows backstage. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Someone who had no obligation to help. Yet this person stepped forward anyway. And in doing so, they would change the course of the night and Freddie's life. Backstage was a battlefield of panicked voices, clattering equipment and frantic footsteps. The moment the cable snapped its warning cry, every technician in the area lunged toward the control panel as if sheer speed could reverse the laws of physics. The production manager, red-faced and trembling, barked orders no one could follow fast enough. But amidst the chaos, Freddie Mercury remained suspended above the stage, a single silhouette against the blinding arena lights. A man the world believed untouchable, now hanging by a thread. The crowd erupted into rhythmic stomps, believing this trembling, dangling moment was Freddie's latest theatrical reinvention. They chanted his name with the force of an army. Freddie! 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 The stadium shook. The rafters vibrated, and Freddie felt the tremors travel through the steel frame beneath his feet. He squeezed the railing harder, whispering through clenched teeth, "Steady, just stay steady." But the platform groaned again, a deep metallic moan that seemed to come from the bones of the structure itself. Sweat trickled down his back, chilling him despite the heat of the spotlights burning from below. He listened for any voice calling to him, any reassurance that someone had control of the situation. Instead, he heard only frantic shouts drifting through the metal grids. Emergency switch isn't responding. Backup system is offline. We need someone up there now. Freddie's heart twisted. He wasn't afraid of death. He had flirted with danger enough times to know it never truly scared him. But humiliation? Being exposed like this, weak, dangling, helpless before thousands, that chilled him deep in the height ever could. The cable popped again. A sharp, sickening sound. Freddie gasped and forced his body against the platform, gripping both sides with desperate strength. A tremor ran through his legs. For the first time in years, he felt his confidence crack open, revealing a terrified man beneath the star. Then, without warning, a second spotlight swept across the rigging above him, revealing the faint outline of a figure climbing the steel ladder toward a malfunctioning lift. Freddie squinted. Who the hell? This person was moving fast. Far faster than any stagehand would dare climb under panic. He watched as the figure reached the catwalk, pulling themselves up with an agility that didn't match the bulky safety gear strapped to their back. Below, the crowd roared again, stamping their feet so violently that dust rained down from the rafters. The mysterious figure crawled toward the cable assembly, pausing only once to steady themselves as the platform jerked another inch downward. Freddie's stomach lurched. His grip tightened. Down on the floor, the production manager yelled, "Who is that?" Who went up there? We didn't authorize anyone. But the figure didn't stop, didn't hesitate. Freddie's eyes widened as the person leaned over the edge of the catwalk, reaching toward the cluster of ropes and pulleys that held the lift. The person shouted something down, but the music blasting from the speakers made it impossible to hear. Freddie could only watch their mouth move. Hold on. Was it meant for him? For the crew? For themselves? Freddie didn't know. What he did know was that he felt a spark, a sliver of hope. The figure pulled a hook tool from their belt and inspected the fraying cable. Then they traced a line to the jammed wheel that had stopped turning. Freddie watched every movement, hardly daring to breathe. If that jam loosened the wrong way, he would drop. If it snapped, he wouldn't have time to scream. He whispered to himself, "Please, don't let this be the end." Backstage, technicians argued in frantic bursts. "We need to cut the power." "No, he'll fall if we cut it." "What about the manual override?" "It's jammed. Everything's jammed." And above it all, the lone climber worked methodically, fearlessly. The platform shuddered again. Freddie's harness dug painfully into his ribs. His hands shook now, no matter how hard he willed them still. He was Freddie Mercury, the man who controlled arenas, who bent crowds to his will with a single note. But none of that mattered as the cable whined under the tremendous strain. He wasn't a legend right now. He was just a man hanging above the void. The climber reached into machinery again, pulling aside a tangled coil of cables. Their arm disappeared into the metal housing as they leaned dangerously far over the catwalk railing. Freddie saw it. The moment the figure located the source of the failure, their head jerked upward as if they found something terrifying. Their mouth formed two clear words. "Oh, God!" A loud snap ripped through the rafters. The platform dropped a full foot. Freddie's body jerked violently, his throat constricted with pure instinctive fear. The crowd shrieked, finally realizing something was terribly wrong. The sea of faces shifted from excitement to shock, hands rising to mouths, screams piercing the air. But the climber didn't back away. They did the opposite. They lunged forward, throwing their entire body weight onto the jammed wheel, gripping it tightly with both arms. Freddie watched in disbelief as they strained, muscles shaking, trying to force the mechanism back into alignment. The wheel creaked, then groaned. Then the platform softened in its descent, slowing just a fraction, just enough for Freddie to regain his balance. The climber held on, refusing to let go. Freddie stared upward, breathless. Whoever this person was, they weren't a technician. They weren't part of the stunt team. They weren't supposed to be up there at all. And yet they were risking their life to keep him from falling. And Freddie Mercury had no idea why. The stadium had transformed from a roaring beast into a trembling, confused mass of voices. What seconds earlier felt like a triumphant surge of energy now pulsed with dread as fans realized that Freddie Mercury, their untouchable star, was in real danger. Spotlights swung chaotically, illuminating the shaking platform where he hung suspended, sweat glistening on his brow despite the cold fear gripping his chest. But Freddie's attention was no longer on the crowd, nor on the horror tightening around his ribs. All he could see was a stranger clinging to the machinery above him. The climbers strained against the jammed wheel, their movements precise yet desperate. Every muscle in their arms and shoulders trembled from the force required to keep the mechanism from collapsing entirely. Freddie squinted, trying to make out their face, but the glare from the stage lights cast the upper rigging into a silhouette of shadows. "Who are you?" he whispered under his breath. The platform lurched again, and the stranger reacted instantly, tightening their grip, shifting their weight, and forcing the metal back into a locked position. It was impossible. No ordinary technician could overpower a failing stage lift, not with brute strength alone. But somehow, this lone figure was holding the disaster at bay. Backstage, the production team scrambled. "We need a rescue harness up there. There's no time. The rig could collapse any second." "I don't care. Someone get a secondary line ready." Freddie barely heard them. His focus was locked on the figure above him. In a strange way, amid the terror, he felt a pull, a connection, as if this unknown savior were the only solid thing left in the world suddenly tilting and breaking apart. The climber finally managed to wedge the wheel into a temporary brace. With a heavy exhale, they turned their head toward Freddie. Though their face was half hidden behind protective visor, their voice carried loud and clear through the rafters. "Freddie, look at me." The words cut through everything, the noise, the fear, the rising panic. Freddie lifted his chin. "I've got you," the stranger shouted. "But I need you to stay absolutely still." Freddie let out a shaky breath. "Well, darling," he called back, forcing a hint of humor into his tone despite the terror gripping him. "I wasn't planning on dancing up here." The stranger's shoulders shook with a faint, breathless laugh, a tiny flicker of humanity in the middle of a nightmare. Then they secured their feet on a narrow beam and leaned forward again. "Listen carefully," the stranger said, voice taut. "Your main cable is failing. I'm holding the mechanism from slipping, but I can't do it forever." Freddie swallowed hard. He already knew. He could feel the metal trembling beneath him, whispering its threat inch by inch. "We're going to get you down," the stranger continued, "but it's going to take time." Freddie inhaled slowly. Time, the one thing he suddenly felt he didn't have. He looked down at the stadium, at the thousands of upturned faces, frozen in horror. These people had come expecting magic, not a tragedy. He felt his chest twist with guilt. The performer in him wanted to reassure them, to smile, to blow them a kiss, to show them that everything would be all right. But the man in him, the one he didn't let the world see, felt small, fragile, human. For the first time in years, he whispered something he hadn't dared admit, not even to the mirror. "I'm scared." He didn't mean for the stranger to hear it, but the stadium fell into an eerie quiet, and somehow the words carried upward. The stranger stiffened, then leaned closer to the edge of the catwalk. "You're not alone," they said softly. "I'm right here, and I'm not letting you fall." Freddie's throat tightened. There was something familiar about that voice, something comforting, warm, steady, but he couldn't place it. Not yet. Suddenly, a metallic crack split the air again, louder than before. The platform jerked violently. Freddie cried out as his body whipped forward. The crowd screamed in unison, and the stranger acted with lightning speed. They grabbed a secondary rope tied to their belt, swung around a beam, and clipped it into their harness. Then, without hesitation, they leaped from the catwalk, slamming into the wheel housing with their full weight. The entire rigging shuddered from the impact. Freddie's breath froze in his lungs. The stranger, panting and clinging with raw determination, groaned. Okay, I can still hold it, but we need the rescue team now." Below, the production manager barked into a headset. "We're sending climbers up the South Tower. Hold it together." The stranger laughed bitterly. "Tell him to hurry unless you want to perform a solo funeral." Freddie's lips parted in shock. The stranger's humor was sharp, bold, and oddly familiar. His heart beat faster. Before he could speak, the strangers shifted their grip again, pressing their shoulder against the wheel. The strain was visibly tearing through their muscles, but they didn't budge. Freddie watched, awe and fear mingling inside him. Why would someone risk their life for him like this? Why would a person he couldn't even identify put themselves in such danger? The seconds dragged like hours. Sweat dripped into his eyes. His arms burned from holding on. His breath trembled with every exhale. And still, that stranger held him. Finally, Freddie called upward, voice cracking, "At least tell me your name." The stranger hesitated, just for a moment. Then, slowly, they lifted their head. Their visor caught the stage lights. For the first time since they appeared, Freddie could almost see the outline of their face. And with a voice barely above a whisper, they said, "It's me. Freddie, you already know me." Freddie's eyes widened. The voice, the tone, the familiarity that tugged at his memory like a thread. No, it couldn't be. Or could it? The stranger drew a long, shaking breath. "Hold on, please. I'll explain when you're safe." Freddie felt his heartbeat thunder inside his chest. Who was this person? Why did they sound like someone from his inner circle? And why would they risk everything for him? As the platform shivered again, the answer seemed to hover in the air, just out of reach. The stadium had dissolved into chaos. Security rushed the front barricades. Technicians scrambled over tangled cables like soldiers on a battlefield. Queen's crew members shouted conflicting commands, their voices cracking under panic. But above all of it, suspended between the heavens and disaster, hung Freddie Mercury, held in place only by a failing cable and the mysterious figure anchoring the jammed machinery with their entire body weight. And that voice Freddie could not forget. He stared upward in disbelief as the stranger repeated, breathless, "You already know me." But the visor obscured everything, their features, their expression, their identity. Freddie's heart hammered like a drum inside his chest, echoing to the terrified silence that had fallen beneath the screams. The strangers shifted their weight again, bracing their shoulder beneath the metal housing. "Freddie, don't move," they warned, a tremor in their voice. "The wheel assembly is slipping." Freddie swallowed hard, trying to quiet the rising panic clawing at his throat. He forced out a steady tone. All right, darling. You've got me. I trust you." And he meant it. He didn't know why. He didn't know who they were. But something inside him, instinct, intuition, fate, told him he could trust this mysterious savior. Down below, security guards tried calming the audience, but fear had already taken root. Chants turned to cries. A woman fainted in the front row. Fans clutched one another, as if watching their hero die in slow motion. Roger Taylor, hearing the commotion from backstage, burst into the wings, nearly knocking over a lighting technician. His face drained as he looked upward. Jesus Christ. Freddie. Brian May followed seconds later, his guitar still slung across his shoulder. How the hell did this happen? Who botched the rigging? No one answered. No one could. Meanwhile, the climbers dispatched to the rafters were only halfway up the support tower. Far too slow. Far too late. And Freddie? He felt his arms weaken, his grip trembling with exhaustion. The harness pinched painfully against his ribs every time the platform trembled. His breath grew shallow. His confidence, the radiant aura that usually shielded him, flickered like a candle trapped in a storm. "Talk to me," he called quietly, almost pleading. "Tell me something to hold on to." The stranger exhaled, a breath that sounded almost like fear. "You always were stubborn," they replied softly, "even when you were scared." Freddie's eyes narrowed. That tone, that familiarity, memories surged through him. Studio rehearsals, backstage banter, cigarette smoke curling in dressing rooms, laughter shared between moments of brilliance and exhaustion. But before he could piece it together, the platform jerked violently, dropping another 2 inches. Freddie gasped, a raw, involuntary sound. The stranger shouted, "I've got it! Don't let go!" Metal screamed above them. Dust rained from the rafters. Freddie clenched the railing so hard his knuckles burned white. Backstage, one of the riggers shouted, "The support frame is bending. If it twists another degree, the whole system will detach." Brian stepped forward, face pale. "We need to get him down now." "We're trying," a technician roared back. "But someone jammed themselves into the mechanism. If we adjust the motor, we might kill him." Roger snapped. "Who the hell is up there?" Silence, until someone whispered, trembling, "It's not one of ours." Roger's heart dropped. Above the stage, the stranger tightened their grip on the wheel, forcing the machinery into place 1 inch at a time. Sweat ran down their neck. Their muscles shook violently from exhaustion. Freddie could see the strain. The hero who was risking their life for him was reaching the limit of their strength. Why are you doing this?" Freddie whispered upward, voice cracking with emotion he couldn't hide. The stranger didn't answer immediately. Their breath came harsh and uneven. Finally, they rasped, "Because you saved me once, and now it's my turn." Freddie's heart seized. Save them? When? Who? But the next moment offered no time for reflection. A fresh crack tore through the rafters, louder, deeper, final. The platform dropped again, this time nearly half a foot. The crowd shrieked as one. Brian covered his mouth. Roger stumbled backward. A technician screamed into a radio, "The frame is going. It's going." Freddie's entire body swung forward, the harness biting into his rib cage so sharply he cried out. His grip faltered. For a terrifying moment, he felt his fingers slip from a railing. "No!" The stranger shouted, leaning dangerously far over the catwalk. "Freddie, stay with me." Freddie's vision blurred. His arms trembled uncontrollably. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. The humiliation of weakness evaporated, replaced by pure survival instinct. And then the wheel slipped. Just a fraction. Just enough. The stranger's foot slid off the beam. They grabbed the railing with one hand, their body hanging halfway over the catwalk. "Hold on." Freddie cried out, but the stranger didn't seem afraid. Instead, they managed a strained, breathless laugh. "Afraid? Freddie, you taught me years ago that we face fear with flair." Freddie's eyes widened. That line, he'd said it once in private, to someone he trusted deeply. Someone he knew. Someone close. Someone who should not, by any logic, be up there risking their life. A technician shouted from below, "We're 30 seconds from structure failure. Evacuate the catwalk." But the stranger didn't move. They didn't retreat. They pulled themselves back onto beam, anchoring the wheel again with sheer determination. "Freddie," they shouted down, "whatever happens, just remember this wasn't your fault." Those words chilled him more than the height, more than the danger. "Why would you say that?" he called, voice breaking. The stranger lifted their head, slowly, deliberately, and with a trembling voice that Freddie recognized instantly. Painfully, they said, "Because I owed you the truth." Freddie's breath caught. Truth? What truth? Why tonight? Why now? Before he could ask, before anything could be clarified, a deep, catastrophic snap echoed through the stadium. Something massive had broken, and Freddie's world dropped into silence. The silence that fell over the stadium was deafening. For a split second, everything seemed to stop. The fans, the frantic cries of the crew, the urgent radio chatter. Even the booming bass of the music seemed to fade into the background as Freddie hung motionless above the stage. Then, like a sudden wave crashing over a shore, reality returned with brutal clarity. The platform jerked one last time. Hard, unforgiving. Freddie gasped. His fingers clawed at the railing, slipping as his body swayed dangerously. He could feel the harness digging deeper into his chest, the weight of the entire rig threatening to collapse beneath him. Panic surged in his veins. He wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on, but above him, the stranger was still there, straining, fighting with every ounce of their being to keep the rigging intact. Freddie's mind raced. He had to know who this person was. Had to. "Tell me your name," he shouted, his voice breaking with desperation. "Please, I can't hold on much longer." The stranger's breathing was labored, their face still hidden beneath the visor. They didn't answer immediately, their focus entirely on the mechanism in front of them. Every muscle in their body trembled from the strain. But then, through gritted teeth, they finally spoke. "You know me, Freddie. You've always known me." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Freddie's pulse quickened. His mind raced. Could it be? Could this person really be? He tried to speak again, but his words caught in his throat. "Who are you? Why are you doing this?" But the stranger's grip on the wheel faltered just as the platform lurched again. They cried out, their voice edged with panic. "Freddie, listen to me. I can't do this forever." And just as quickly as the platform had dropped, it jerked upward with a violent force. The crowd screamed in shock, their voices swelling into a roar. Freddie's stomach lurched, and for one terrifying moment, it felt as though the world itself had tipped on its axis. Freddie's vision blurred. The lights flickered. He couldn't tell if it was the intensity of the moment or his own rising panic. The stranger was still fighting, their body pressed against the mechanism with everything they had left. Sweat streamed down their face. But they didn't falter. He couldn't let this person risk their life for him. He couldn't let them be swallowed by the madness of the situation. "Please," Freddie called out. "You have to get down. You've already done enough." But the strangers shook their head, their voice raw with emotion. "I'm not leaving you, Freddie. Not like this." A cold sweat spread over Freddie's skin. He knew this wasn't just some random act of heroism. This wasn't some anonymous crew member coming to the rescue. There was something deeper, something personal between them. The stranger's words felt like an echo of his own fears, his own deepest thoughts. His mind raced again, the pieces falling into place. But they still didn't make sense. Who was this person? Why were they risking everything for him? Why was it them, the one person who had always stayed hidden in the shadows? The platform jerked again, even harder this time. Freddie's stomach churned as he felt himself start to sway. The ground felt so far below him, his legs shaking with the effort to hold onto the railing. Suddenly, everything clicked. Freddie's breath caught. It couldn't be. The stranger's voice, that faint familiarity, the way they'd whispered his name, as if they knew him, as if they'd shared something long ago. He closed his eyes, forcing the pieces together, pushing through the panic. "Jim," he whispered, barely able to breathe the name. The stranger's body stiffened. The grip on the wheel faltered again. Their breath hitched, and for the first time, their voice cracked with emotion. "Freddie, you remember?" Freddie's heart skipped a beat. Jim Hutton. A flood of memories rushed over him. The quiet nights in a house in London, the tenderness they shared, the bond that had only deepened in the final months. Jim had always stayed behind the scenes, a quiet strength in Freddie's life, a constant presence he never fully acknowledged. Until now. He'd never told the world about Jim, never shared the quiet love they had built together. But now, in this impossible moment, it was clear. Jim Hutton had always been there. Always. "Jim," Freddie whispered again, his voice trembling. "I had no idea." "I know," Jim replied softly. "I never wanted you to know, Freddie. I never wanted anyone to see this side of me." Freddie's eyes burned with unshed tears. The realization crushed him. All this time, Jim had been standing in the wings, silently supporting him, risking his life, and never asking for anything in return. Jim was the one person who had always been there. Not the public figure, not the rock star, but the man who Freddie had loved without ever fully acknowledging him. And now, in this life or death moment, Jim was the one pulling him back on the edge, giving him a chance to live, to continue being the legend the world adored. But at what cost? At the risk of losing everything? Freddie couldn't breathe. The weight of the truth slammed into him like a wall. "Jim, stop," Freddie said, his voice hoarse. "You have to let go, please. I don't want you to." But Jim's grip tightened. "I won't leave you," Jim said, his voice firm. "Not now. Not ever." The tension on the lift reached a breaking point, and for a moment, Freddie thought he felt the structure snap. The cables above them groaned with a final, gut-wrenching scream. But just as the last second of hope began to fade, the sound of a rescue team arrived, their voices rising above the chaos. "Jim, get out of there." But it was already too late. The mechanism collapsed with a final snap. Freddie's world went black. Darkness swallowed everything. Not the comforting darkness of a quiet dressing room, or the sleepy haze after a long night recording, but a violent, consuming void, the kind that steals the air from your lungs and freezes time itself. Freddie Mercury didn't know whether a second had passed or an hour. He couldn't feel the platform beneath him, couldn't feel the harness, couldn't hear the screaming crowd. He floated in nothingness. But slowly, like a fading spotlight returned to life, sound began to seep back into his world. Distant shouts, metal scraping, someone calling his name, voice cracking with fear. Then a sharper noise, a groan, deep and metallic, like the dying breath of the collapsing rig above. Freddie gasped. Air rushed back into his lungs, and with it came pain, a sharp, biting pressure across his ribs where the harness had cinched during the fall. His vision flickered open in bursts of blurry light. The stadium light swung wildly overhead, casting dizzying arcs across the sky. He was moving. No, he was dropping. Slowly but undeniably. He felt his stomach twist as gravity tugged at him. The emergency cable, the last surviving line, was unwinding. The descent was uneven, jerking violently every few seconds. He clung to the railing, teeth gritted, fighting the rising panic threatening to overwhelm him. "Hold on." Freddie, hold on. The voice came from above, breathless, trembling, desperate. Jim. Freddie looked up. High above him, Jim clung to the catwalk, one hand gripping the beam, the other still attached to the secondary rope that had prevented the entire mechanism from plummeting. His visor was cracked, his face streaked with sweat and grime. The muscles in his arms trembled violently, not from fear, but from the unbearable strain of holding the remaining tension in the rigging. He had saved Freddie, and now he was paying the price. Jim! Freddie shouted, coughing through the pain. Let go! You have to let go before the entire frame collapses. Jim shook his head fiercely. I'm not leaving you. Below, the rescue team scrambled across the stage, deploying a massive inflatable safety mat, shouting coordinates, waving frantically at one another as they attempted to position themselves beneath Freddie's descent. But the angle was unstable. The emergency cable wasn't designed for a control drop, and the support frame above them was failing. A deafening metallic shriek echoed through the rafters. Freddie flinched. Jim's head shot upward. The steel beam he clung to bent slightly, just a fraction, but enough to send terror through both men. Jim, go! Freddie yelled again, his voice cracking. You can't save me like this. You'll die. Jim's voice broke. I'm not watching you fall. Freddie, not when I can stop it. The emergency line jerked again, lowering Freddie another foot. The mat below rushed closer, but the angle still wasn't right. If he fell now, he would miss it entirely. Freddie's mind raced. He tasted blood in his mouth from biting down too hard during the earlier fall. His hands trembled around the railing. His ribs throbbed with each breath. But none of that mattered compared to the sight of Jim, risking everything, refusing to let go, defying gravity with nothing but raw determination. He couldn't bear it. Not again. Not after everything. Not after the quiet nights Jim had held him when the world felt too heavy. Not after the whispered conversations, the tenderness, the calm strength Freddie had never admitted he needed. Jim had saved him in ways he never recognized until now. And Freddie would not let him sacrifice himself tonight. Freddie raised his voice. The same voice that commanded stadiums. The same voice that could silence thousands. Jim Hutton, listen to me. The stadium felt eerily quiet. Jim froze, his breath shaking. Freddie drew in as deep a breath as his injured ribs would allow. You said you wouldn't leave me, Freddie shouted. But I'm telling you, if you die tonight, if you let yourself fall, then I fall with you. Jim's eyes widened behind the cracked visor. Freddie continued, voice raw, trembling with emotion. You hear me? I'm not surviving this without you. Not again. Not like this. If you're gone, I'm gone. The words slammed into Jim with the force of a tidal wave. Below them, the crowd gasped. Some cried out Freddie's name. Some begged Jim to let go. The rescue team shouted new adjustments, trying desperately to align the safety mat beneath Freddie's swaying descent. Jim's grip faltered, just for a moment, as emotion tangled with fear. Freddie, he whispered, voice breaking. Don't say that. Please don't say that. But it's true, Freddie whispered back, though the wind nearly tore the words from his lips. You matter to me, more than you know. And if this is how our story ends, then we end together. Jim's breath shuddered. His entire body trembled, not from exhaustion now, but from the weight of Freddie's truth, a truth he had waited so long to hear, yet never wanted in a moment like this. But then, a deep, violent quake shook the rafters. The support beam snapped another inch. A chorus of terrified screams exploded across the stadium. Jim's feet slipped. His hand slid across the beam. Freddie's heart stopped as Jim's body tilted. Dangerously, teetering on the edge between the catwalk and nothingness. Jim! Freddie screamed. And Jim, the man who had risked everything, finally lost his grip. He fell forward, into empty air, straight toward Freddie.